Hi, this is Rabbi Rami Goldberg, and welcome to Biblical Money, powered by Israel 365, where we take a deep dive into how people of faith enhance their business by staying true to their biblical principles. We interview leading CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs to capture their wisdom to help us live our most fulfilled and faithful lives. Please like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date and informed. Hi, I am Rabbi Rami Goldberg. Welcome back to another edition of Biblical Money. Today, we actually have a very interesting show where we are going to be talking about money from a different perspective, actually from a mental health perspective. We have Nino Fincher with us, and she is a therapist, and a big portion of what she does specifically deals with and talks to people about finance and how that interacts and how that can affect mental health and I guess our religious state of mind, and how we're able to cope with those various challenges of money will really impact our religious, not just observance, but kind of our religious aspects. So Nino, welcome aboard. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your practice? How'd you get started? How'd you get into this? I'd imagine they don't have a special major within the university or the master's degree that says, you're going to become a specialist within money and finance within the therapy world.
I studied traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I practiced that for a little while with my mentor and a couple other amazing therapists in private practice, working with them. And then several years after that, I came across what's called Rapid Transformational Therapy. It's a method that was developed by Marissa Peer of the United Kingdom, and it's an amazing method that combines three different modalities of therapy, which is traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnosis, and neurolinguistics. And the combination of those three allows for a very quick and effective way of getting to the root of the problem and solving it for a client. So most of my clients don't spend more than 2 sessions with me in therapy. Now, I do a coaching program, and it's a little bit different and it's a little bit more extended. But as far as the RTT, it's very quick. And money was not what I started specializing in. Most people kind of were anxious who were coming to me. But a lot of anxiety was about wealth and finance and how to handle things for their family. And of course, COVID didn't help with any of it. But it's quite interesting how many people struggle with the concept of wealth and being able to earn or being able to get clear about how to pursue their finances, or even kind of reason through them and allow themselves an opportunity to ask for it when necessary, whether it's for the raise or for money from the clients, etc.
Yeah. Is it mostly people who have too much or too little that are coming to you?
I've worked with both. Yeah. People that I've worked with who have a lot of money struggle in different ways when it comes to money. So one of their issues is often inability to get clear about what the priorities are, and the struggle between finance and relationships. And for people who have issues with, not having enough of it, are dealing with, inability to ask for a raise or inability to kind of prioritize the tasks that get them there. Most recently, I had a client who is a very well-trained real estate professional who has all the certifications, all the knowledge that he needs, and he struggles with sabotage. So just getting to the cusp of where he knows he's going to make a great deal and then just sort of giving it up or surrendering it or walking back from it. And so that also had to do with how he perceives money and the worth. And so there are a lot of interesting issues that are connected with it.
I'm curious about that. So he sabotages because he feels unworthy, or he feels that, I guess what, other than being, feeling worthy, but like what would cause somebody to walk away from a deal?
This particular individual, he went through a foster hell, basically. And every encounter that he had with the persons of authority communicated to him that he wasn't significant. His thoughts weren't relevant or important. His feelings weren't relevant or important. And so he basically learned to fail. And every time the opportunity for potential success presented itself, his perception of what he is able to do was always the default. And the default was, you're not going to succeed. because you always fail. So why even try? And so I'm thrilled to say that I did one session with him. We're still kind of in the process. I usually take 21 days to kind of follow up with my clients. And he says that he's feeling the breakthroughs and he's getting up on time. He used to not get up in the morning at the right time, and he's motivated completely differently.
That's amazing, because you feel like, wow, I see what the root was and able to move past it. So money very often then is much more of a symptom than it is an act, the problem itself per se. I saw this thing once about, I forget the exact name of it, but it's basically like a rapid financial growth syndrome or something along that line, where people come into a great deal of money in a very short period of time, and there's like paranoia involved because, okay, maybe they're going to either lose it or someone's going to take it from them. Is that something you've experienced? How do you help someone in that situation?
I think for people who struggle with that, the problem usually is that there's no foundation that is greater than finance or wealth. So your foundation needs to be something so stable that money or no money shouldn't be affecting it in how your values are conducted and what values you live by. And so a lot of the times people who come into money, like for instance, people who win a lottery, very often, I think, I don't know what the number is. It's a very high percentage that lose the money very quickly within maybe a year or 2 years. And that's because number one, again, they have some kind of a subconscious perception of themselves that this is not something that they're going to continue to succeed in. They never deserved it in the first place. But more widely and importantly, they just don't know what the purpose of the money is, and what how money is supposed to reflect just an aspect of what your greater value and greater foundational truths should be. And for those of us who are believers, I mean, it's God, and everything is based in Him. Whether it's our relationships or our wealth or whatever else it is. I mean, it's just a reflection of how you interact with God and your relationship with the deity. But for people who don't have that foundation, then it's just kind of, it's like, I think G.K. Chesterton called it being firmly planted with feet in midair.
So people who win the lottery, or sports players who are coming off the streets, but I mean, you do have people who have not been successful, that are value-filled people. They just sometimes don't really understand that, the proper investment strategies and tools, and they have sometimes such a big heart. I'd imagine they want to go out and help every single person that they've ever interacted with, because why should I get it? And they're giving it. So they have the values, but they don't understand the mechanism. I think I'd imagine that's something that comes up.
I think you're right. I think it's a combination of 4 things. Number 1, your values and your worldview. Number 2 is your knowledge. 3, skills, and then tools. And so if you don't have a nice combination of those 4 things, you're going to be missing something. Now the good news is that skills and tools can be obtained and taught. Knowledge as well. Values are a little bit different. So you need to be really clear. I mean, people need to understand why they want something and what is it that they want it for. And if there's no clarity and cohesion between those 4 aspects, then you're struggling no matter what kind of amount you're dealing with, I think.
Yeah. And that, I'd imagine, is a problem for a lot of people. I've seen some of these people. There's a story with the great basketball player Shaquille O'Neal, where he tells the story about how he spent $1 million in a day. And the story roughly is that he got a signing bonus of $1 million, and he came home and he was like so excited. He went out to the car dealership, spent $250,000 in some super fancy car, and then came home. And his father tells him, hey, son, what about me? And then his mother, and he bought for them, and he bought a couple of suits. And the banker actually called him in and said, listen, I know this is just your signing bonus and you're going to be worth a lot more, but I'm not going to let you be one of those kids that just waste all of your money. And so he forced him. He said, I'm going to cover you for now. I'm not going to, penalize you, but forced him to sit down with different financial advisors. And eventually it was actually some Orthodox Jew who was just he was like, listen, we're going to put everything into the stock market. You're going to be able to spend, 3 to 5%, whatever it is. And the money will grow in a very conservative way. And he was like, okay, I like that. And eventually, he's now, I think, worth over $1 billion. But, coming into that, a lot of these players are like, literally from the inner city, haven't seen, $5 to their name. And, and they jump that wealth.
A big issue, I think, with that is people feeling not enough. That's also a case with a lot of addictions as well, but like the sense of kind of incompleteness or the insufficiency. And so trying to fill it with something like the cars or, it creates the perception of now you're enough. Now you have enough. Now but it's a false direction to take. And, I've heard his story. It's actually a very interesting story. And so, gaining skills and being connected to the people who understand how to help you and just teaching you things that are very, simple to understand and follow, is fantastic. But the problem becomes when the issue is a lot deeper and it's mental and emotional problem that kind of trips you up every time, no matter how much money you make. I mean, there are people who continuously make money and continuously are bankrupt or in debt or, can't make ends meet somehow, and they continue to make more and more and more. So, yeah, it's a lot of the times I think it's a mental emotional issue for a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, we all think, oh, if only I had another few dollars, I would be good. And have, what do you, a client comes in, they're like, listen, I have $10 million in the bank and I'm stressed and anxiety. I mean, and you're sitting there like, your jaw hits the floor. You're like, oh, I wish I had that, but people don't always realize some of the challenges that come along. So what are some of those challenges that you've seen that people come in with?
A lot of relational problems. People who are wealthy but not positioned in terms of their values well enough struggle with relationally, or they continue to go from one relationship to another very often. And so the priorities that God set in the order in which He set them have to be considered, because that's how it works. God's laws work because they're God's laws, whether or not you believe in them. And so a lot of relational problems, a lot of stress and kind of burnout problems. I've seen anxiety is a big one with people who are wealthy. Depression is huge. Yeah, with a lot of people who are wealthy and not have their priorities aligned properly. Feeling like sort of purposelessness, is a big one. Like, what's the point? So I'm making all of this, but to what end? Those kinds of things is what I come across and see most of the time.
Yeah, and so take me through kind of your biblical approach to this, and I imagine some of the people that come in are believers and some are probably not, but I'd imagine your approach is somewhat consistent because it is biblical. So love to hear how you approach it from a biblical perspective.
Yeah, so people that I work with through my coaching program, we deal with body, heart, mind, and spirit, because I think those are the aspects of what makes us human. And the spirit is what controls every time, and you're either subjected to the Spirit of God or some other spirit. And then the next level of influence is the mind. And the mind is kind of this massive operating system, which is made up of a conscious and a subconscious mind, that unless there's a coherence and cohesion between the two and a proper subjection to the right guide and the right spirit, there's a dissonance there all the time. Then emotional state which is a lot of the times how money decisions are made, is subjected to the mind and how your mind directs you. And then body just kind of follows like a, sheep, just kind of wherever it's guided. So those are the four parts that I think are important for us to consider and make sure that they're aligned. So there's no dissonance between the four of them. When it comes to rapid therapy training, what I normally do is I need to know what the client specifically wants. And so that's one of the questions that I always ask my clients. What is it that you want to have achieved or to have gotten rid of or changed at the end of the session? And it's stunning how many people don't know what that is. And the more clear and specific you are with your mind, the more effective and efficient it's going to be in trying to help you get there. And so once they have the clarity on what it is that they want to work on, then I work with them on getting to the root of what is preventing them from getting there. Excuse me. And so my sessions are usually about two and a half hours long, but we get to the bottom line. And then we transform the perception and the framing that they've assigned to that issue that keeps preventing them from success. And so the neurolinguistic part is me making a recording for them that they then listen to for 21 days, which is the amount of time that it takes for neural pathways to establish the connection and create the direction into a new path, basically, that your mind is unfamiliar with. And that's how the transformation happens. So that's what my RTC sessions are made up of.
Wow. Okay. So you're really not talking very much about money. You're really talking about much more in terms of the relationship, whether it's a relationship with spouse or kids or God, rather than it being, oh, let's talk about this very tangible, or sometimes not even so tangible, but tangible thing.
When people struggle with money and issues with money, money is not usually the problem. The money, like you said earlier, is just a symptom or the outcome. And a lot of times, the ideas that a lot of people are raised with are that money's dirty, or that misquoted verse about money is the root of all evil, which is incorrect. Money doesn't grow on trees, or only just all these, only rich people, somehow you're greedy if you're going after that, and money's supposed to be given away, and don't you have enough? All those things that we hear, or a lot of people hear growing up, form the perception and the relationship people have with money. And so that, even though they don't think of it consciously that way, subconsciously, that becomes the operating system. And your subconscious mind will always resist if that is what it's familiar with. And so the familiar way and familiar ideas that you have adopted growing up without maybe even realizing them will always be prevalent. And so money is never a problem.
It is interesting. I always find that when looking through our Bible stories, God blesses Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and on and on and on. There are very few, poor people actually within the Bible, I know there's a few more stories within the Christian Bible, but certainly within the Hebrew Bible, there's very few, and we don't find that God says to Abraham, "Hey, I'm going to bless you with all this money," and He blesses him, and then what's He going to do? He's going to give it away, and he's going to become the next Mother Teresa, or the first Mother Teresa, that we're living in a poverty state, and no, what does he do with it? He sets up a tent and he uses that money for influence, positive influence on the world, which we've obviously seen, and we are the recipients of that positive influence. But
Sure.
but a lot of times that perception is like, no, this is not good, and it does lead to greed,
Right.
and people who are running companies are greedy. I mean, part of the reason why I've started this series is because I'm speaking to CEOs and executives and all sorts of people who are doing kingdom work, and they do it in such a way that they have a massive impact on the people that they work with, on their employees, on their communities, and doing all this great stuff because God blessed them with the ability to understand you gotta buy low and sell high. That's really something that retaking that narrative, I think is really critical.
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of religious leaders haven't helped in teaching properly, I think, about money. Films, I mean, every movie you see, a villain is always some wealthy, brute who's just trying to take over the world and has all the things that all the poor people don't have, and it's just this constant bombardment of lies and inaccurate messages, because God did say prosper. God did give us the ability to establish ourselves and be blessed. I mean, Solomon was blessed. God gave him the wealth. He didn't ask for it, but that was the bonus of the blessing, and you're right. Abraham, Job, all the righteous, all the patriarchs, all the people that we look up to in the scriptures are blessed. Boaz, I mean, you name it, they all are gifted with prosperity and the cattle and the wealth, and and it's always given to bless others. But when you don't have and you don't know how to build, how can you give away? How do you pour from an empty cup, right?
Yeah, no, you always need to have something. Elijah, when he pours into the oil, it starts with something, and you need to have that blessing that comes forth. God can make miracles, but we have to set that foundation where the miracle can happen. It's very rare that you're going to have the win the lottery. And I think those that are a little bit more fiscally responsible recognize that lottery is really a tax on those that are trying to hit it big.
Right.
If they would take that money rather than buying a lottery ticket, every
and
week
invest
invest it, you'd be in a much better place. But
somebody I knew called all the gambling places monuments to losers, which is sad and unfortunate. But even with the widow, in the passage with the widow, he tells her, the prophet tells her to go sell it now. He doesn't tell her to now go give it away. It's you make profit to then continue to establish your household and take care of your sons and take care of yourself. It's really changing how we perceive things and how we have learned to interpret things and how we learn to frame things is a massive step in trying to get the freedom and the clarity and the capacity to do what's right and what's beneficial and productive. Not just about money, but all the other things as well.
And you find that people are coming in with such incorrect views of money that it's really impacting so many
all
other
the time.
areas.
Recently, I had one of the ladies that came to me. She said, "I want to quit my job." She had a corporate job in higher management, and she wanted to join a startup. And she was looking at the position of the CEO for this startup, which was promising, and she could have made a lot of money. And so she was struggling to negotiate the salary that she thought she was possibly worth and that they were able to pay. And it was so interesting. So she grew up on a farm, and so when we started working with her, one of the things that we found that she grew up on a farm, and the hard work, manual work, was valued, and so the rewards only happened if they did this much work, or if they collected this many potatoes, or whatever it was. And so it was brutal, kind of a way of her parents having her go and work and not really be rewarded for it. And so asking for the simplest things that to her she perceived as rewards was unacceptable. So asking for new shoes, for instance, or asking for something that sounded to her extravagant, that today we would think, oh my gosh, of course you're going to give that to your kid. You don't even wait for them to ask for it. It was a pattern that she grew up with. And so it became such an operating system for her that when it came time to really get into a position that she could have done really well, she struggled to even negotiate or go into the negotiations. And I'm thrilled to say that she took that position, and she actually is getting more than what she was hoping to ask for. So I'm very proud and happy for her.
Yeah, no, it's always hard to understand your own worth, and to because again, that those things are all tied into really a metaphysical. There's actually a comment I saw by Rabbi Daniel Lapin. He points out, he said, money is a spiritual thing, and he defines spirituality in the fact that it's that physical things are things that animals do. If an animal saw you eating, okay, with a fork and knife, so it sees you eating, they could understand that. They see you eating with a fork and knife, mm-hmm. that already removes us from animals. That is already a more spiritual, or a way to elevate our eating to a more spiritual manner. If an animal, yes. your dog is sitting there watching us, you take that cup of lemonade and give it to me, and I give you $1 for it. The animal is not going to understand it at all. And so he says that it's really a spiritual matter, that all too often that we don't recognize it as such, and we think of it as something that's very, very physical, and it doesn't really work that way.
No, it doesn't. Well, and I think we talked about it earlier, that money, the money itself is a material thing, but the wealth is completely different. So wealth is a spiritual concept. Wealth is the concept of prosperity and abundance. And I hate how sort of cliche that term became, and how it's overused and maybe even misused by a lot of people. But that was the idea in the garden. There was an abundance and a lack. I mean, God gave every tree abundantly, -1. And so, and Satan reversed that, as he reverses everything else and says, no, this is what you're lacking. And so that whole foundational perception of life and worldview and everything that we've been given by God, that is turned to a lie of a Satan, is how a lot of the problems are created, and money is often associated with the lack rather than with abundance. And I think if we were to change it, a lot of things would change mentally and emotionally with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have. You see the story of Jacob and Esau, how Jacob says, "I have all," and Esau says, "I have most." He says, so he's living with a scarcity mentality, whereas Jacob is living with this abundant mentality, and it's there. So one thing I think is happens to be challenging, and I think if we were to rewind the clock to our grandparents and before, there was actually a scarcity. Now, I think we're seeing a lot of ails within our society because people don't. We've moved into a society of plenty. Even people who are unfortunately not doing particularly well in America are still way better off than most of world history, even of the kings.
Yes.
You have running water or whatever, and I think that becomes a challenge. Well, I have all of this this money, which can translate into stuff, which could translate to other things. But I think that's really a challenge where I guess what you mentioned before is kind of having those foundations, that are there.
I remember my grandmother telling me that she said that during like how many times people heard clean up your plate when they eat. Don't leave anything on your plate. Clean it up and eat everything. And so if people were raised in the generation where the generation prior to them went through the World War, for instance, I mean, one of the things that I remember my grandmother saying was it used to be that the bread was so valuable. She said that if you saw it on the ground, you'd pick it up and you'd kiss it and put it somewhere, on top. Like you wouldn't just walk by a piece of bread because it was so sparse and so valuable for people. They would trade golden watches for a piece of meat or something. When the things were really, really difficult. And so, but that translates into, now you have enough food, you have to eat it. Now you have money, you have to save it. Now, and all this, again, the idea and mentality of not enoughness and sparsity, like you're saying, makes for a worldview and the conscious state that then keeps you from freely, investing or trying something new or giving it away or you name it, whatever it is that a person struggles with. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting you just mentioned bread. So within actually Jewish law, you're not supposed to just throw out a piece of bread into the garbage. You should, if you're finished and you're not going to be eating, so you should wrap up the bread. It should be treated, that we don't just, kind
with
of
respect.
We treat it with respect. We don't just,
Yes.
just dump it in the garbage. And I think that's, just a sensitivity towards where it comes from, and a lot of the blessings that we say before we eat, recognizing
Yes.
where it comes from. There's an author,
and that's like you said, that's that foundation of you recognize who the author of anything you get is. Your breath and my breath is given as a gift. God withdraws it and we're translated, but and so is with everything else. You just, and that's why having that foundation of the value positioned correctly makes all the difference in every aspect of life.
Yeah. So there's an author, A.J. Jacobs. So he's a comedic author. One of the things that he did, I think, I forget the exact title of the book, but he wanted to thank everybody who was responsible for making his cup of coffee in the morning. And he went through the supply chain. It wasn't just the barrister, but he went so far as to the people who are, picking the coffee beans and the train that brought it over and, all of those things. But then you have like a real appreciation about where did this come from, and it's not just I go and I pay my, my $4.59 and, get myself a Starbucks coffee in the morning.
Talked about the pencil. Yeah. Your pencil, where your pencil comes from and the rubber that erases it and it's kind of the same concept. It's very funny. True.
What would you say you're speaking to a parent? I myself have kids who are not little. Obviously, when they're little, you can't really talk to them about money. But what are the messaging that we should be giving over as as parents to our kids to ensure that they end up with a healthy approach to money, not too much and not too little.
Yeah.
No matter where we we actually fall within our bank accounts.
Right. So, isn't it the psalmist? Was it David or I think it was King David who said, "Don't give me so much that I become ungrateful and not enough that I curse your name." Right. So having that proper balance of what you have. I think for parents to be able to teach their children the character of God and who their God is essential. And God is the God of love. He's the God of abundance. He's the God of grace. He's the God of forgiveness. And he's the God who wants you to prosper and have hope and have abundance in your life. and he's also a God who's gracious and kind. And so, just teaching children who their God is sets the foundation for how they perceive the world, and how they operate in the world. So I would say that's essential. And also, being able to instill in children that they are that there's a sufficiency in them, that they don't lack in any way, that no matter what they may not have, or they may perceive that they don't have, whether they are struggling to read, or they're struggling to walk, or they can't make friends easily, they still have the strengths and the capacity and the ability to build whatever it is that they choose to set for themselves. So empowering children to understand that you're not a victim, you can win with whatever it is that God gives you, would be another important message. And to teach them, the New Testament talks about taking thoughts captive, and putting them into the obedience to God. And I think being able to help children understand how to think through and reason through things. A lot of the times, religious parents will have children avoid a lot of things, like maybe don't listen to this music, or don't watch that movie, or don't engage with this person. And that's reasonable, to a certain extent, but you cannot remove a child from the world. So you have to train a child how to reason and think through concepts, and how to discern and understand why this may be good for them and why not. And that, of course, has to be established in a foundation, primarily, but then also being able to really kind of walk through maybe the lyrics of the song and say, okay, let's think about this and let's talk about this, or sit with them after they've watched a movie and say, okay, so what was the message that they were trying to, teach you through this? What is it that the movie wants you to believe, or what is it that the movie wants you to understand and do? I mean, everything, I think, for a parent is a moment to teach and establish, but being able to help a kid understand how they perceive something and how they frame it, and that they have the power and ability to change the perspective, images, and words that they attach to something, will give them the freedom and the power to create situations that are winning rather than staying in defeat.
That's great. I mean, I definitely try to do that, and I know my my preteen and teenage daughter definitely roll their eyes every single time. I'm like, oh, so what do you think was the message in the movie? They're like, Abba, and that's father. Right? It just that's just what it is. It was there to have a good time. I'm like, no, but what do you think the message is? Who do you?
Yeah.
And they get me for the 5 minutes that it takes me to drive them to school every morning, and that's when I will do all my lecturing. Listen, you're in my car, and you want me to give you a ride? That's it's daddy
good for
time.
You, man. Take heart. Don't surrender. That's a valuable 20 minutes or however long it takes you to get them to school. This was a classic. When my kids were growing up, there was Polar Express was a movie. Okay. That came out, I don't know when, but and it's cute and charming, but then there's this line in the movie that the conductor says, no matter where the train is going, what matters is that you get on. And I just thought, stop the presses. What the hell, excuse my French, is going on here? Like, what is that? How does that make sense? It doesn't matter where the train is going. What matters is you get on. So that was a big conversation about, like, do we want to know where the train is going before we get on? What in the world does that mean? And so that, so if you even like capture a phrase or I mean, because you can discern what the worldview behind, what the message is communicated is, and just kind of extract that phrase or extract that story or something, and just ask them about that specific story, and ask them to help you, think through it. And, what you just kind of talk emotional stuff and mental stuff about it. It'll be I think helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely
Um,
important to engage. Yeah.
Ravi Zacharias, I really have enjoyed many of his talks and books. One of the things he used to often say, he said there are three levels of philosophy. So there's the academic level of philosophy that most people don't engage in, and it's done on scholarly level. And then there's philosophy of the media and the arts, where a lot of people kind of are exposed to whatever we're exposed to. And then he said there's a kitchen table philosophy, and kitchen table philosophy is basically, we're going to do it because I said so and I'm your father, and most people stay in that state, but that's a very important state to be in. So as parents, we have that gift of access to our children's minds, and the responsibility of kind of directing them and guiding them in the way they should go. So it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, and I think what's challenging is when we grow up, and whatever your parents bequeath to you, you don't necessarily always understand those biases. And my parents, it was like, you go to, if we went to a restaurant, it was like you couldn't buy a soda. That was like, not just because of health, it was like an extra $1. Okay, so you get two slices of pizza and you'll drink some water, and so that was something. And my wife's family is a little different, and you're brought up with these things and you don't even realize it. I'll tell you just one funny story. When we first got married, my wife, I brought in the mail, and I put the first credit card bill on the table. And 2-3 days passed, and I turned to my wife and I said, "So when are you planning on paying this?" And she's like, "When am I planning on paying this? Whenever you feel like it, you could pay it." So in my house, my mother, very good with numbers, and she was always the one to pay the bills. And in my wife's house, my father-in-law
Yep.
was an accountant, and that was his
Yeah.
job. So suffice to say, I lost that one. Happens to be I enjoy the money and how things work and setting things up
Yeah. Live and
more
learn.
than she does. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly something that is
But
really
but
important
so
where you
isn't
come
that
from.
also interesting? Like even teaching your children that's an important conversation to have before you. I mean, there's so many important conversations to
Yeah.
have before you get married, obviously. But but just because it's done so in our family doesn't mean that you can't make your own traditions and you can't create what works for you. But it's yeah. But kids, I mean, we all do what we know, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And and it's just so interesting. I mean, you're talking about the values, how the money and, is secondary, and values are really primary, and, having that, faith and that focus. So, but anyway, we're getting to the end here. Any book recommendations that you would make, or a podcast that you find that are helpful or inspire your thinking that we can take with us into our everyday lives?
Okay. Well, there are a lot. So my all time favorite is always C.S. Lewis. My C.S. Lewis is my go to. I like the way he thinks. I like the way he writes, and he has
See,
he has a variety of topics. C.S. Lewis, and for children as well as adults. When it comes to mental health, one of my favorite, well, I have several favorites, but one of my favorite books is called "You Are the Placebo."
okay.
And it's by Joe Dispenza, which is a very interesting book about how our mind helps heal, the body as well as everything else. Another book I would recommend, if people are interested in that sort of thing, is called "The Body Keeps the Score."
Yeah, that's what
His name
Vanderkolk,
is
right?
yes, Van der Kolk.
Yes.
And another also good one. Now, none of these people, I don't think any of them are believers, but they have a lot of good information in all of them. And then finally, Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. Also, I really enjoyed that book as well. Very interesting. Talks about epigenetics and again how the mind, neuroplasticity of the brain. And then Dr. Leaf is another favorite. She's a Christian neuroscientist who I think is very good at describing a lot of these concepts.
Amazing. We'll have to take a look. Add those to my library. So, Nino, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here, sharing your wisdom. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get to you?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so grateful for the welcome and allowing me to participate. The easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. Or my website is ninofit.com. It's NINOFIT. It stands for Functional Integrated Therapy. And just send me a message that way. And I'd love to talk to people, help people. I do workshops, you name it, speak. It would be fun to connect with your listeners as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time and giving us some of your wisdom.
Thank you. God bless you. Take care of yourself.